Lisa Marie Velasquez stepped onto the stage, the overhead lights showering her with a halo. Behind her, a large screen displayed images of survivors of domestic violence, faces of strength and courage. But no one knew that behind her confident gaze was a woman who had endured unforgettable pain. She never mentioned her past during her workshops, never spoke of the times she had witnessed beatings she was powerless to stop. Those memories were too painful, and Lisa didn't want to bring them onto the stage, only to continue helping others. "We are not hopeless victims," Lisa said, her voice powerful and resolute. "We are warriors, and we can survive." She looked down at the rows of seats, where the workshop participants were listening attentively. She never forgot why she was there, not just for her job, but for all those who had experienced what she had. Lisa Marie Velasquez was a powerful woman who had risen from her dark past to become a prominent social activist. She ran a non-profit organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence. She didn't just share legal knowledge, but was also a listener, a pillar of support for anyone in need of help. Every time she stood on stage, sharing her story, no one could have guessed that the wounds in her heart were still unhealed. Each workshop, each sharing session, Lisa would close off a part of her painful past and instead shine a light of hope for those around her. She was a woman of strength, never easily subdued. Those who had met Lisa felt the power of her resilience, but few knew that behind her confidence, Lisa always carried the pain and unforgettable memories. Alongside Lisa was Sierra, her girlfriend whom she loved and with whom she shared her most private thoughts. Sierra was an introverted, gentle, and loving soul. She was one of the few people who understood the smoldering pain within Lisa without needing words. However, Sierra had a complex relationship with Daquan, her boyfriend. Daquan was a man with an appealing exterior, but who hid bursts of anger, jealousy, and uncontrollable behavior. The relationship between Sierra and Daquan was always tense, something Sierra couldn't express. She loved Daquan, but also felt afraid of the controlling behaviors he exhibited. Lisa, with her sharp eye, couldn't ignore the changes in Daquan's behavior, especially when he started acting strangely. But because of her close friendship with Sierra, Lisa didn't want her worries to affect their relationship. She didn't want to lose the only friendship she had. But every time Daquan was around, Lisa felt that something was not right. This relationship, though not entirely clear, had a vague feeling of danger that Lisa couldn't ignore. Lisa and Sierra's relationship began in the early days when they met during a community project. Sierra at that time was a volunteer, like Lisa, always willing to help those affected by domestic violence. However, Sierra's gentleness and sincerity quickly caught Lisa's attention. They weren't just colleagues, but friends, people who shared an ideal, a mission. Even so, their friendship was not always smooth. Every time Lisa invited Sierra to participate in sharing sessions, supporting victims, Daquan would always act strangely. He became jealous every time Sierra spent too much time with Lisa, as if he was afraid that Sierra would be attracted to Lisa. He didn't like the closeness between the two of them, and gradually, Lisa noticed the tension whenever the two met. This caused Lisa to worry, because she knew that controlling behavior could lead to danger. Daquan was a man with a gentle appearance, but with extended contact, Lisa began to feel a clear difference in his attitude. At first, he appeared to care for and look after Sierra, but then he started behaving strangely. The relationship between him and Sierra became increasingly tense, and his unreasonable jealousy began to surface. He constantly checked Sierra's phone, questioned her about everyone she met, and even once forbade her from participating in community activities organized by Lisa. Lisa couldn't help but feel worried, but because of her friendship with Sierra, she didn't want to interfere too much. Lisa couldn't understand why Daquan acted like that, but over time, she began to realize that his control was a clear sign of violence. These actions were not protection, but manipulation, a way for him to maintain power and control in the relationship. Lisa understood this clearly, but she didn't know what to do to help Sierra without hurting their friendship. One evening, as Lisa was working, she received an unexpected call from Sierra. Sierra's voice was trembling, as if something was wrong. "Lisa, he's acting strange again. I don't know what to do." On the other end of the line, Lisa sensed the anxiety in Sierra's words. For Lisa, what Sierra was going through was all too clear. He, Daquan, was not just Sierra's boyfriend, but also an overly controlling person. She knew that the jealousy, the unreasonable fits of anger from Daquan would not just be words, but would quickly escalate into violence. Lisa took a deep breath. She couldn't leave Sierra alone to face that dangerous man. Anxiety overwhelmed everything, and she decided to go to Sierra right away, even though inside she knew that things had gone beyond normal precaution. When Lisa arrived, Sierra's door was unlocked, but when she opened it, the space inside was completely quiet. Only a dim light shone on the sofa where Sierra sat, her face tense. But as soon as Lisa stepped inside, a cold breeze blew through the room. She heard footsteps outside in the hallway. Before she could realize it, Daquan was standing right at the door, his face flushed with alcohol and his eyes showing clear anger. Lisa knew he was coming, and in that moment, she could feel the shift in the atmosphere. "Sierra, I want to talk to you." Daquan's voice was deep, as if he was no longer himself, but had been taken over by jealousy and intoxication. "Daquan, I want to talk, but not now." Sierra tried to remain calm, but her words were not enough to soothe his anger. Daquan didn't wait, didn't give Sierra a chance to explain. He pushed the door open and stepped inside like a storm. His heavy footsteps echoed in the quiet space of the room. The dim light from the desk lamp dimly illuminated his alcohol-flushed face. The intoxication seemed to have swallowed his reason and caused him to lose all control. He looked at Lisa with a hostile gaze, his eyes wide and his eyebrows furrowed, as if the whole world was against him. Lisa stood still, feeling his every step, her heart beating faster. Memories of the past flooded back, the violence that had happened to her, and her mother returned. She knew that no matter what she did, no matter what she said, Daquan's anger would not stop. And this time, it was not just the anger of a boyfriend, but the cruelty of a man who had lost all reason. "Lisa!" Daquan shouted, his voice heavy. "How many times have I told you? You and Sierra, you can't be close anymore." Lisa tried to stay calm, but in her heart she knew that Daquan was beyond reason. He swung his hand, and before she could react, a powerful punch sent her staggering to the ground. Lisa clearly felt the pain spreading throughout her body. She closed her eyes, using all her strength to stand up, but he had quickly lunged at her, not giving her a chance to react. Sierra stood not far away, but seemed frozen by fear. She wanted to scream, to stop Daquan, but an invisible force held her back, preventing her from moving. Every blow that Daquan inflicted on Lisa seemed to stab into Sierra's heart, but she could do nothing to save her friend. "Don't do this, Daquan," Lisa managed to shout, but only received a cold shrug in response. Daquan didn't stop. He continued to punch Lisa, making her unable to stand. Each of his punches seemed to tear through her soul, not just the physical wounds, but the unspoken pain. She clearly felt powerless, unable to protect herself, unable to do anything to stop this rage. After his violent attack, Daquan stood panting, a strange cruelty in his eyes. He turned to look at Sierra, his voice deepening but full of power. "You will help me cover this up? Sierra, if you don't help me, I'll make you regret it." Sierra stood still, fear overwhelming her heart. She couldn't utter a word, only watched the painful scene before her, unable to do anything to stop it. Every moment that passed seemed like 1,000 years, and she clearly felt that everything was too late. She couldn't fight back. She couldn't save Lisa. Daquan approached Sierra, placing his hand threateningly on her shoulder. "If you love me, you will do what I say. Help me, and we'll never have to worry about this again." Sierra felt as if her whole world was collapsing. She didn't know what to do, didn't know how to face this terrible truth, but she understood that once she had fallen into Daquan's trap, she couldn't escape. She bowed her head, guilt overwhelming her. This scene, the silence after the violence, was something Sierra would never forget. Fear, regret, and guilt would haunt her forever. After the violent act ended, the atmosphere in the room remained heavy. Lisa lay motionless, in pain, barely having the strength to fight back. She felt like the world was spinning, everything around her suddenly becoming blurry. Daquan stood over her, panting like a mad beast. He looked at Lisa, as if wanting to make sure that she had no chance of resisting. Sierra, still standing in place, couldn't move, couldn't cry for help. Everything seemed to stop for a moment. Fear and guilt surged within her, but what she felt the most at this time was panic. She wanted to save her friend, wanted to pull her out of Daquan's hands, but fear had made her indifferent, helpless in the face of evil. Daquan bent down, looking at Lisa coldly. "You thought you could save her," he said, his voice full of ridicule. "Now, she can't save herself anymore." He looked at Sierra and gave a crooked smile, then turned and walked out. Sierra seemed to wake up from a daze, but it was too late. She couldn't do anything but follow, not daring to look at Lisa's face one last time. Daquan led Sierra out to the car, hurriedly leaving the house, carrying with him what he had done. He took Sierra to Corona Park, where the light had faded. Both of them stopped near the dark forest, where there was no one, where no one could hear a cry for help. At this time, the madness inside Daquan could not be contained. He dragged Sierra behind him, then began the brutal act without hesitation. The horrifying scene unfolded in the dark, as Daquan began to dismember Lisa, in a cruel and cold-blooded manner. Each time the knife pierced Lisa's body, everything around seemed to go silent, leaving only the rustling of the wind and Daquan's heavy breathing. He was completely out of his mind, no longer seeing what his actions were. Sierra, standing far away, her eyes full of tears. Her heart seemed to be torn apart as she witnessed this scene. She couldn't move, couldn't say a word. She wanted to stop it, wanted to run away, but her feet seemed to be locked in place, unable to move. After finishing, Daquan threw Lisa's body parts into large garbage bags, without any remorse. He was like an emotionless machine, with no regrets. "Now it's done," he said, sighing, then turned to look at Sierra. "You won't tell anyone about this, will you?" Sierra couldn't say anything. She bowed her head, guilt and fear bigger than ever. She knew that she had let her friend die, that someone who should have been saved had been deprived of everything. Daquan didn't stop there. He continued to drag Sierra with him to an empty lot in the park and buried the rest of Lisa there. Without any respect or pity, Daquan chuckled, covering Lisa with dirt, as if he was erasing her existence. "No one will find her here," he said, his voice echoing in the night. Sierra, standing alone, her heart broken. She couldn't turn back to look at her friend one last time. All she felt at this moment was extreme pain, and the fear that she could not escape the evil that she had participated in. Sierra couldn't sleep. Every night, she tossed and turned, unable to escape the image of Lisa, her close friend, who had always been by her side, always protected her, was now gone. The screams in Sierra's heart echoed nonstop, but she couldn't escape. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had witnessed, what she had done. She couldn't forgive herself for not stopping Daquan, for letting Lisa go like that. Every morning she woke up, the pain was like a wound still bleeding in Sierra's heart. The memories of that night kept repeating in her head, the loud blows, Daquan's mad look, the threats, and then the cruelty he inflicted on Lisa. She felt as if she had betrayed the only friend she had, and the guilt kept haunting her. One day, Sierra could not bear it anymore. She knew she had to tell the truth. Although afraid, although she knew that society would condemn her, Sierra couldn't live in silence any longer. She picked up the phone, hesitated for a moment, and then called the police. She needed to bring justice to Lisa, even a small part, even if she had to pay with everything she had experienced. When the police arrived, Sierra sat silently in the room, her hands trembling, not daring to face them. She told them everything that had happened, every detail, every moment, from the time Daquan attacked Lisa until he forced her to help cover up the crime. She could no longer remain silent, even if it meant facing the painful truth. "It was me. It was me who helped him," Sierra choked, unable to say any more. She looked at the police, then looked down at the ground. Feelings of guilt, shame, and torment engulfed her. Sierra's confession was a key turning point in the investigation. The police immediately proceeded to arrest Daquan. When they led him out of the house, Daquan showed no sign of remorse. He smirked, as if everything was just a game to him. "I didn't do anything wrong. Lisa deserved it," he said, his voice full of contempt. She was too close to Sierra. She didn't know how to keep her distance, and she dared to think that she could save everything. He mocked and laughed madly, not at all worried about having to face the law. The police did not show any leniency. They had gathered enough evidence in Sierra's confession to charge Daquan. He was immediately arrested and faced the charges for the horrific crimes he had committed. Sierra's confession had brought Daquan to justice, but it had also sealed her own fate. In the days following, as the weight of her actions began to settle in, she was consumed by a constant internal battle. The image of Lisa's broken body haunted her every moment. She couldn't escape the guilt, the overwhelming realization that her silence, her fear, had cost Lisa her life. Sierra had tried to convince herself that she was just a victim too, that Daquan had forced her into helping hide the truth. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had been complicit. She had stood by, watching her friend be killed, and had done nothing to stop it. The silence she had kept was just as much a betrayal as Daquan's violence. The sorrow that filled her heart was unbearable, but the shame was even worse. As she sat alone in her small apartment, her once thought to be sanctuary now feeling like a prison, she relived that night in her mind over and over. She could still hear Lisa's scream, the terror in her eyes as Daquan's hands closed around her neck. She had begged him to stop, but in the end, it was her own hesitation and fear that had sealed Lisa's fate. The guilt gnawed at her, each day feeling like a reminder of her failure. The truth was, Sierra had not only lost Lisa that night, but she had also lost herself. She couldn't even look in the mirror anymore without seeing the face of the girl who let her best friend die. Every phone call she received, every person she encountered, reminded her of the betrayal she'd allowed to happen. The fact that she was still alive, when Lisa was gone, felt like a cruel joke. At the trial, when she was called to testify, the words stuck in her throat. The people in the courtroom, the ones who had loved Lisa, looked at her with disgust. How could she be the one to speak the truth when she had done nothing to stop the horrific crime in the first place? She couldn't look Javier or Isabella in the eye. She knew that no matter what she said, she would never be able to redeem herself in their eyes. Her guilt would follow her forever, a shadow she could never escape. As Daquan was sentenced to life, Sierra was left with nothing but the burden of her conscience. The court had done its part, but there would never be enough justice for Lisa. No verdict, no punishment, could ever bring her back. For Sierra, the punishment would always be the same, living with the knowledge that her actions, or lack thereof, had sealed the fate of the one person who had truly loved her. Years passed, but Sierra's soul never healed. Every time she saw a woman fighting for justice, she thought of Lisa. Every time she helped someone in need, she thought of how she had let her friend die alone. She had tried to move on, tried to forgive herself, but the pain never truly faded. She was trapped in a cycle of self-loathing and regret, a punishment that no one could impose on her but herself. And in the end, the greatest tragedy was that Lisa's death, so senseless, so brutal, was the beginning of Sierra's own suffering. She would live with the torment of knowing she could never erase the past, that she could never undo the betrayal that had led to Lisa's death. Sierra's story became a warning, a reminder that the price of silence, of inaction, was far greater than anyone could ever imagine. The cost was a life, and the punishment was a lifetime of regret.